So we are live. Welcome everyone. Welcome everyone joining us online, joining us here at Factory in Berlin. I am Diane Drubet, the founder of We Are Museums and the co-captain of the Artist Circle here at Factory. It's such an honor to welcome very soon on this stage artists, professional from the art market and professional from blockchain all together. Such a strange mix, no? But you will see it's very far away from that. I am personally very inspired and very convinced that the art market can really find new ways and new emerging models in the NFT space. And that's actually what we will try to figure out. It is a beautiful laboratory of new ideas and new practices. And I find that I hope that tonight, together with our dear guest, we will be able to find all these ideas and to unpack them and see what is possible. We've done this event and the two upcoming ones in strong collaboration with Daoud. He's a founder of License Rock and the co-captain of the blockchain circle here at Factory. So, Daoud, thank you for joining me in this adventure. And it's the first time that two circles are actually collaborating.
Yeah, thanks a lot for the introduction. And my name is Daoud. I'm the founder of License Rocks. We're a startup. We're building NFT product suite around license solutions. But I'm also a co-captain here of the blockchain circle here at the Factory. And the blockchain circle is about like bringing together people which want to know something about decentralized technologies and how that can be applied. And what's super important for us, we really believe that decentralized technology will impact like all kinds of industries. And we always have to get out of the blockchain bubble, I say, and we have to talk with people who are interested in that. And I'm super excited to see today how it will probably change the art world. And for that, we have tonight Stina Gustafsson with us. And she is a creative strategist, and she's also a curator. And she's someone who's working for the DoD, the notorious, fabulous Department of Decentralization, who did like a lot for that ecosystem, like building up also the Berlin Blockchain Week as one of the major players behind that, and of SoftSpot. And I like to introduce right now Stina and welcome her to the stage.
Thank you so much for the introduction. And thank you so much for having me. So before we start with the panel, I'm just going to do a short intro speech. In 2019, when I co-wrote my first report on the intersection of blockchain and art, there was very little crossover, and the main point of the report was that there was what was being celebrated and pushed forward was the new alternative platforms that was helping to sell NFTs. We concluded that NFTs was a topic which was still very much isolated into crypto and blockchain circles, and it wasn't really gaining that much attention or traction in the more mainstream channels, and the idea was still fairly isolated to crypto and blockchain. But fast forward 2 years, and as we all know, the situation has changed completely. Everyone is talking about NFTs, or non-fungible tokens, as they also called. It's now being discussed in every clubhouse room. And it's covered by mainstream media, and the more traditional art world is really trying to figure out how to get their part as well. But how did we actually end up here? How did we get to a point where NFTs, which used to be really niched and really stick with a really small community, how did we end up where everyone was talking about it? So first of all, what is an NFT? An NFT, or a non-fungible token for the long term, is, quote, a unit of data stored on a digital ledger called a blockchain that certifies a digital asset to be unique and therefore not interchangeable, end quote. NFTs can have an extremely wide variety of areas, since it's basically a digital certificate that represents the ownership of a digital asset. Though NFTs became widely popular in 2021, it's not a new phenomenon. It's been around for a really long time. And what's quite funny is that the discussions within the community is that no one can really agree on what was actually the first NFT project. Some people claim that it's Etherea, which is a virtual world in which players can own tiles, farm them from blocks, and build things. It was launched in 2014. The tiles are still on sale on their website, and some of them are listed for thousands or even hundreds of thousands of US dollars. But it's actually not quite easy to find out how much they actually sell for. Though this project is disputed because the community don't really quite agree if it's actually an NFT or if it's NFT-like project or a so-called proto-NFT. Other claims that the CryptoPunks were the first project. They are 10,000 unique characters, and it was launched in June 2017 by Larva Labs. At the start, they were free to claim for anyone who actually had an Ethereum wallet, but now you actually have to buy them to get one. And they are super popular. Just now in May, we saw 9 of them being auctioned out at Christie's 21st Century Evening Auction, and the total sum of the sale was $16,962,500 US. And the same year, in 2017, Super Rare also launched their beta version. They are still around, and they are still a very much popular platform for artists to use. But now we have so many more. We have Super Rare, as I mentioned, Known Origin, Foundation, Async, Hiketnunk, Kusama, Rarible, Makerplace, and that's just a few of them. But going back to the rise of NFTs and why it's happening first now, why did it start in 2021? Well, it's actually quite hard to say exactly why, but I think we can all agree that previous year, 2020, was pretty harsh on all of us, and especially for the art sector and for artists. As we all know, exhibitions got cancelled and everything was moved online. And instead of meeting in person, we ended up having conversations on the new app called Clubhouse. And to be completely honest, I think Clubhouse do play a big part in why it gained such traction this spring. It was simply discussed in every room. Everyone knew what they were talking about and everyone was an expert. And also on top of that, 2020 was a very fruitful year for crypto and blockchain. And as we know, where money goes, people tend to go as well. It's been a very positive market for blockchain and crypto for quite some time, or at least until yesterday, if you follow the crypto market. And the context of last year's economic uncertainty just brought a lot of people to that specific area. People wanted a part of it. Also the crypto places, the marketplaces I mentioned before, such as Super Rare and Hiketnunk, have evolved dramatically over just the last year. They are now much better at catering for specific audiences, collectors, and markets. We've seen high-end profile artists and high-end products and artworks being marketed carefully on design platforms, and they feature comprehensive onboarding flows and put artists in the spotlight at the same time as they educate audience and also their users. And also the crypto community, which is still very much the drivers of these platforms, have now becoming proper crypto collectors. They are a completely native, digitally native audience and group, and these files that's being sold, the digital files that's being sold on these platforms, fit exactly what they're looking for. They don't necessarily want a physical product when it comes to culture and art, but is rather looking for something that is easily stored, aka an NFT. But I mean, I think we can also all agree that it's not all sunshine and happy times. There has been an extreme influx of artists, which also means that everyone that's joining the platform now has to cut through so much more noise to even be heard or seen. On the other hand, the collector space has not grown in the same way. So yeah, artists are competing for quite a few collectors still. And to be also frank, some parts of the system is still pretty close because majority of the platforms are still run as companies. I would say that basically what we're seeing right now is a rise of a new version of the creators economy, where the idea is that everyone should be able to make a living of their passion or skill. But sadly, I think that reality is quite different from what's potentially being promised. But I do believe that NFTs can be used for the greater good of artists or the art community or the art economy or the whole ecosystem. But for that to happen, there needs to be a lot of collaboration. And I think that is absolute key for the development, for a sustainable system, for long-term thinking and for growth. And I think we are really seeing some of that in some of the platforms that have popped up the last year. And I'm going to end with some advice from Paul Saffo, which is the founder of the proponent of Creators Economy. He did offer some useful suggestions to consider for us to prepare for difficulties and build sustainable structures and platforms. So consider these rules for revolutionaries. Rule 1, there are always winners and losers. Rule 2, in a revolution, do not confuse the early results with the long-term outcome. Rule 3, successful insurgents tend to become overpowerful incumbents. Rule 4, technologies of freedom inevitably become technologies of control. And I think, needless to say, these 4 rules of revolutionaries should be something that we keep in mind as we continue to build and grow. Thank you. So before we start the discussion, everyone is going to introduce themselves briefly.
Is the mic open? Yes, perfect. Hi, I'm George Vitali. I'm the founder and director of Synthesis, which is a curatorial platform and exhibition space based in Berlin. We have been around for about almost 4 years. It's a new media art space with focus on XR art, and yes, I guess this should be enough for now.
Hello, my name is Jantine Derksen. I work for TC Connect. We're a company here in Berlin focusing upon advancing the Tezos ecosystem. Tezos is a blockchain, a proof-of-stake blockchain you might have heard of, but yeah, I can tell you later a bit more.
Hi everyone, my name's Albert. I'm an artist and researcher in creative technologies and digital art, and I was in the first promotion of the Artist in Residence here at Factory Berlin with Sonar Plus D. And regarding NFTs, I've been playing and experimenting with Hackathons, basically or mainly for 3 reasons. One is the environmental impact or the lack of it, obviously. Then because it's very experimental, and because of the sense of community that it seems that we have in that platform.
So I think we got a question here, which I think kicks off the discussion quite good. What excites you most about NFTs?
So yeah, I mean, I can start. So NFTs, like what you all already said, Stina, are there quite a long time. But what really excites me is that it's actually now being picked up by the community, so that you can really see that the blockchain that enables, NFTs, non-fungible tokens, is really connecting with the real world. So what you were saying, actually, Hackathons, for example, you can see that artists, they really would like to show their work, and they find a platform like Hackathons to, put their art through an NFT to the public. So I think it's like one of the big pushes that connects blockchain at this moment with like the first movers in the real world. So it's a really exciting space to watch, to see where it goes to, and to have artists like Albert experimenting with it.
Yeah, absolutely. From my point of view, as both artist and researcher, it's kind of a must to at least explore and experiment with this new medium, this NFT format, and just like the fact of playing with it or understanding it first, or at least trying our best to understand the complex technology that is behind, that's already like a huge interest for me. I would say that that's mainly my drive when I first enter in this community. So I would say that that's what really interests me, like finding a new or exploring a new format, a new medium of expressing my creativity through a new technology.
I consider I've never really got into, that sort of like gold rush kind of train where everything is beautiful, everything about NFTs is perfect. I've never considered, and I still do not consider NFTs as a game changer of some sort. I think they're just an openers of possibility. I'm more interested in, before actually, we probably, and we will get into this conversation, I guess, later as part of the conversation and the topic related to what is actually an NFT. And I'm more interested in the possibilities that it opens, in the uses that can be leveraged, for example, by museums or institutions, like to do fundraising, for example. Another like a recent news. So, for example, the Uffizi Gallery in Florence selling a digital facsimile of I guess, a Michelangelo for like $170,000 as a way for them to actually fight a little bit the drop in revenues due to the pandemic situations. I'm interested, for example, in seeing how the NFTs can be sort of like an opener for a new generation of artists. And when I'm thinking about this, I'm specifically thinking, for example, to the post-photographic digital art generation, that the newer generation, post-photographic, that has been completely limited by, and kicked out of the market because by an older generation of artists who owns who have a questionable market share, own a really questionable market share, and the newer generation has been holding back. And so I'm more interested now, the opportunities and the uses that, that the NFTs as a technology can grant people. And of course, aside, the conversation related to what actually an NFT is in terms of like, what are we actually talking about? If we're talking about NFT as a media or as a certificate of authenticity linked to an artwork. I think this is an important distinction that needs to be made.
But at the same time, I mean, when internet came around and it wasn't necessarily considered to be a medium for art in any way, nowadays we do have internet art, which is quite a big category, though I completely agree it needs to be distinguished, but I see possibilities just like with internet, it can be used for several different reasons or different things, whereas NFTs or blockchain technology can potentially become the same thing as well, where it actually becomes a genuine medium for artists, but it can also, act as certificates, provenance, etc., and support those aspects of the art market as well.
I think actually what I thought was interesting, what you mentioned, George, is this new generation that then sees where is my space in this art market. And I think what we can see with blockchain technology is that it's kind of a democratizing tool. If you talk about like the public blockchains, like for example, the Tezos blockchain, we are working open source. And I think if you look at then, for example, Hackathons, a marketplace, that are open source frameworks. No one stops anyone of taking the framework and making another marketplace. And this is, I think, this understanding that we're actually collaboratively working on advancing this technology and as well empowering people, because like it's peer-to-peer technology. So the middleman that we always have been seeing in the art space, right? Like the whole idea of this curation, we can do it. Like there are still as well what we have been seeing as Tina with the marketplaces that have been built upon blockchain technology. They don't have to have like everyone can enter and present their artwork. We have Hackathons, and that's non-curated, so yeah, everyone can have a place there. We also, for example, with Tezos, I'm more familiar with Tezos, of course. We have Trucy, and it's a highly curated one. But what I think is so important here is the notion that everyone can create their marketplace. Everyone can, make their own architecture behind it. And in the older world, so if we are talking about the older art world, it was very difficult to get in. And I think this is a frustration that a lot of new artists had. So I think we do challenge actually the art world, very much so. And I think maybe we are even challenging the whole concept of what is art.
Sure, like following up on this super critical question that you were saying now. Like for me, when reflecting on exactly what you just posed, it's like, okay, if we try to really think about or reflect about the value that we are assigning to these digital, let's call it goods, assets, elements, versus the value that we assign to physical objects, which in the end, we're talking about digital art more in general, but in this super specific case of the NFTs and having just images or audiovisual little pieces. I mean, the most recent scientific research on the difference of assigning value to digital versus physical goods, it's still, the data still shows that we as humans assign more value to physical assets. But as you know, like in academia, even like the most state-of-the-art research is still there's a bit of a lack with the reality that we live in. And I would say that in this super short period of this last couple of years, I would say that, I mean, I don't want to play this fortune teller thing because I hate it, and more as a scientist, but everything feels that we are going, or there's this tendency of maybe swiping or reaching the same levels of us assigning the same value to digital objects or digital assets in comparison to physical objects. This feeling of possession and this idea of collecting, just like JPGs or all these artworks that are in these different platforms. And I would say that we are gonna see this tendency the same way. Just if you let me make this little comparison that we've seen like in these last years with, for instance, AI, artificial intelligence applied to visual arts and music, or in the creative industry in general. So like when it was first introduced, everyone was, this is nonsense, this is bullshit, all these artifacts that we are seeing like in terms of music, sounds, or like in the visual aesthetics, we were not giving any kind of value and quite the contrary. We were kind of canceling it, but lately I would say that it's quite the opposite, trying to find like these human-machine interactions, getting these aesthetics or artificial aesthetics and finding lots of beauty in it, giving a lot of value. And I would say that maybe we're gonna find something similar in this new format that we are seeing these days.
So just backtracking a bit in terms of mentioning open source and non-curated platforms, etc. How do you think it's possible to have that, but also balancing it now when the wider art market is coming in and with a urge of being taken serious by other art places, etc.? Because that's quite common that you see that some of the, for example, some of the auctions that's happened with Christie's and Sotheby's and now Christie's again, even though the community keeps on saying that, you know, we don't necessarily want to be like the art market, we trying to not try to recreate it, there is still some kind of yearning for a certain acceptance. But is it possible to keep these completely open platforms and still be taken serious by the more traditional art market, so to say?
So I would say yes, they will be taken serious. And I actually think that they, like the traditional art markets, they will also embrace this new technology. You see it already with Christie's, Sotheby's, that they are actually experimenting. What I think that they're challenged with is the extra value that they're giving. So where we first only relied upon them, so we only had those gatekeepers that we could go to, now they're being challenged by this whole democratizing tool. However, if they do, deliver extra value, if their curation really stands for something, people will still make use of them. So I think it's not like that they will disappear. It's just that their extra value, that is the reason why they will survive. And if they don't survive, that I think means that the value they were giving was not good enough. So, yeah.
I was reflecting upon like a few things. First off, that I would like to link with the concept of democratization. Every time a new technology of representation comes into place, those they yell that believe they're building sort of like heavenly utopia world where everything is going to be fixed. Think about how Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram were perceived when they first launched. Do you remember? I'm not old enough yet, thank God, to remember when Twitter was portrayed as the tool for overthrowing aristocratic or just authoritarian governments. The so-called Arab Spring, in Yemen and Egypt. Every journal was praising Twitter. Facebook was the tool for the creation of human connection. What could possibly go wrong if you reconnect with your former classmates, right? And then look at now how the perception of these tools has changed. Now, like we no longer look at Facebook and Twitter and Instagram as beautiful tools, but as tools for propaganda and social manipulation. And the point I'm trying to make here is that the concept of like democracy is like in a way it's problematic to me a bit, because how can you raise a democratic argument when you need technology to access the work? And it's a heavy tech, it's blockchain. It's not just a Nokia 3210 from like 1985, right? Or something like that, the 90s. Openness, yes, there is definitely openness, but are we sure we are doing a good job at representation? Because that's where actually your argument about curation comes into place. Because to me, the role of the curator is so crucial to index, preserve, educate people on art that that will stay here today and tomorrow and the day after and the day after, and preserved and conserved in the same way we are enjoying it now for the future generations. This is, to me, is crucial. It's a crucial topic. So then with regard to Christie's, I guess they sold Beeple for a lot of money. it was a brilliant business decision, because they couldn't pick up anyone like, better than Beeple. They picked the best. I mean, you like him or not, the guy is the icon of, literally the ambassador of the community, with like thousands of works that he put out every day, So from a business perspective, hands down to Christie's, great job. I know auction houses have had a growing interest in selling NFTs, or like NFTs related, works that are not probably that are sold as as true NFTs. So the point where I'm going to get here is that technology is fluid, and is by the way, and think of Clubhouse. Someone like brought up Clubhouse. Clubhouse success can only be explained because thanks to the pandemic times. And by the way, it's turning into, like, the other day I was there, and I realized that it didn't pass the Israeli Palestinian conflict, because in some of the rooms they said atrocity. So I'm really concerned that it will turn into another Facebook or Twitter right now, tool of propaganda. So having said that, technology is fluid. It's a tool. It's not inherently good or bad. It's up to us to really write the rules, and literally when I say write the rules, I'm thinking of the smart contracts, and I'm thinking of Web3, for example, of this architecture that is going to be bigger than us, that you don't really want to take on all of the systematic inefficiencies or like imbalances and injustices that are part of the past. You brought up AI. Let's talk about inherent, how racist AI was, and it still is, and the biases that are around that.
Absolutely.
So it's like, really, to me, this is really important, because right now, and I'm done because I've been talking too much. But I feel like I'm living what I was living in New York City in 2016, when everyone was talking about VR and everyone was saying, "Oh, it's the next big thing." Yeah, 5 years after, I mean, there's definitely, we have entered a more mature phase. So I would say we need to look at the technology and be mindful and careful about what we are doing right now, in order not to reiterate the mistakes that we've done in the past.
Absolutely agree, 100%, and absolutely, we need to be super critical. Also, one concept that we haven't mentioned, and it's another elephant in the room, or one of these concepts that people keep repeating, is scarcity. This idea of scarcity. Scarcity, and I guess we need to be super critical too. Of course, it's been present naturally in the art world because of the resources that artists had, and building up or developing their works, and with the materials they had, and generating copies of that was, it was very, or it required lots of resources. Nowadays, with all the digital art, of course, it's tremendously easy to produce copies of the same artwork. And this scarcity, it became, or it evolved to something very artificial. And this obviously has lots of consequences, and it becomes very problematic, because at least there are studies that show that this perceived scarcity, what produces is more risk-seeking behaviors, with all the negative consequences that this might entail. So of course, we need to be super critical, not only in terms of the technology, but the behaviors that this technology make emerge in a sense. And I know what I'm gonna say, it's super obvious, but we're talking about super complex systems, and it's super problematic to get rid or to cancel opportunistic behaviors just by probabilities. When talking about, or when dealing with these super complex systems, it's almost impossible, probabilistically speaking, to get rid of this opportunistic behavior. So, of course, it's up to us, making use, for instance, of this stage today and making sure that, yes, there are lots of beauties and promising facts about all this era, but at the same time there are like huge and super alarming facts.
Yeah, also coming back maybe to the initial question, what makes us so excited about NFTs? When I mentioned it's now taken by the broader community or like by the real world, I think it's really true to say technology is just a tool. However, in this case, what I think is very important also to realize is that the tool, it's not finished, and I think the tool will never be finished. It's like the fact that it's open source, that's very different from like the Twitters and the Facebook in the past. They developed a technology that was there to monetize. So of course their branding story was something else than that was in their interest, right? In order to increase profits. So there we see actually like in the beginning, we used the tool what we thought that they told us that it was for. And then at a certain moment, we can see that the monetization for it was actually sometimes not really in line with what they promised us that the tool would be for. And I think what we see here now with the whole blockchain being open source, being a public technology, is that it's actually an invitation now to the whole world to interact with it and say, what do you want? And if people say we want A and B and there are just enough people, it's just something to be picked up, because as a developer, if I develop this, people will make use of my technology. And I think it's just such a creative time for blockchain that finally we're reaching this stage that we're experimenting with people making use of it. And if we're then, for example, talking about NFTs, it's not just I connect now an NFT to a digital artwork. You can, for example, when we're talking about your earlier point, digital versus non-digital, when we go to a museum, not all the art that we're seeing is owned by the museum. Often a piece of art is owned by someone else that just puts it in the museum. With the new tool that we're having here, or the new tools actually have, because it's a whole spectrum that the blockchain, that you can build upon a blockchain. Think about fractional ownership. I have to say it correctly, fractional. So it means that what if we say we all would like to fund an artwork and we would like to exhibit it somewhere. That can be done through NFTs, and then there's still this physical object, but suddenly you open up this whole possibility of ownership as well. So I think it's not only just about connecting a token with an artwork, it's about what can we program more, what do we want more, how can we use this technology for all the things that we want, and then challenge the market and say we would like to have A and B, and let's see if we can program a smart contract around it.
Absolutely. Also, like in this spectrum of that we were mentioning before of digital versus physical, I think that's where like a huge potential also resides. Like this, we have this, in a sense, these two layers of reality, and there's a lot of, it's super challenging, of course, but that's also the new roles and that could have galleries and cultural institutions try to experiment and explore how to interact in between these two types of realities, how to connect them, how audiences can interact with them. Of course, it's super promising in that sense, at least from my point of view, the interconnection of these two different levels of reality.
Just tying back a bit to your point about technology is only as good as the users or the developers, etc., and also talking about the financial opportunities. Like you mentioned, that blockchain is very much about monetizing and etc. Is there a risk that this speculation that's going on within cryptocurrencies, etc., and this hyper extreme willingness to make more money on something small the whole time? How do you feel about that? Do you think it's a big risk that could potentially make this to a technology that certain parts or make it into something that people feel actually, no, this is not anything that we want to be part of. Because for me, for example, some of the conversations that I see around it, that's my main problem when it comes to certain parts of the NFT community, is this constant willingness of making more money on something, etc.
I think that's a very good point, and I was talking about it with my friend and artist Amico Tio yesterday, precisely about these things, because speaking again of Twitter and Clubhouse, because that's how you get the pulse of the NFTs communities. That's where everything happens. I mean, yesterday I was really surprised. 2 days ago, I was really surprised to see these rooms and these talks about, now that cryptocurrencies are dropping, it's time to make NFT, so the price drop, it's more convenient. So here we need to get so by linking the valuation of an asset, the crypto, to the valuation of another asset, the artwork, you have created what in finance will otherwise be called a synthetic product. You don't basically don't get exposed. You gain exposed to what you want, the artwork, without buying the cryptocurrency in this case, right? So without getting exposure to the cryptocurrency, it's a synthetic product. But that's scary to me. That's scary because by a blockchain system is based on a crypto that has little to no purpose if is dead. If the crypto is dead, the blockchain has to have a strong crypto. That's the whole point of it. Addressing a piece of art like a stock is an idea that gives me shiver, because art is much more than a stock, and I'm being so banal. And there are issues related to the artwork that are currently not being addressed, like conservation, for example, or the legal issues, which are, speaking of people dreaming of a word like on-chain word, legal issues related to NFTs are a very strong and probably traumatic wake-up call. So there is the gold rush. The gold rush is there. There are things that really are frightful to me, but there are other examples of people doing great things already in their community. And I'm thinking, for example, of what has been done by Transfer Gallery in America, and things like their different approach is definitely something that should and pave the way for a more I would say more mindful and thoughtful approach to NFTs as a tool.
I also think that, of course, when we would say we connect all the NFTs to the tokens that people speculate with, of course, then you get this issue. But again, I think this is the nice thing about this technology. You don't have to do that. You can actually say we would like to have a token, for example, stablecoin, that has a stable value. And I think this is also the other thing. People are driving this whole space. So if people are driven by greed, you will see that like the last months, people were all talking about the crypto market. But the crypto market is just one aspect of blockchain. Blockchain is a ledger, a digital ledger, that offers so many possibilities beyond just speculating on crypto, that if you are saying, okay, we want to empower artists, you can create game theoretical systems around it with the token. I think there's this whole field called token economy, and that is, I think, we are entering this stage that, okay, the developers, the blockchain architects, they have given us a base technology, but now it's actually about inviting other disciplines like economists, mathematicians, and so on to think about, okay, how can we then create this token economic systems that the incentives are aligned in a way that it's not driven by greed, for example. Of course, we can still have a market driven by greed if we want that there's place for that. But there's also place for other nice initiatives. You just have to put your minds to design it in a way that greed will not take over.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the topics that really worries me, and I'm going back to what I said of this, that it's quite difficult to get rid of all these opportunistic behaviors when treating with this kind of complex system. But through this, on the other side, I guess a side of me still wants to be a bit optimistic. Maybe it's because I'm too naive, but my experience, I would say that it's super biased because of the only platform or the only community that I've been with, which is like in Hackathons, which definitely I would say that there's much less of opportunistic behaviors in there. And a good example of all the stuff that we've been discussing in terms of like, where do we want to go with all this? A good example is what's going to happen this weekend, which there's a hackathon with all the artists, developers, whoever is on the other side are going to hang out and try to put together ideas and decide on what they want to do and how this platform should evolve.
I think the hackathon around Hackathons, the hackathon, right? Yeah, I think it's a very good example again of this pressure of the real world. Like, okay, so a tool has been built. It's a marketplace, fairly simple just to start with. But then actually the people using it are saying, hey, but I'm missing functionalities. Hey, but I would like to have this and that. And I think these kind of hackathons that until now, hackathons has been very developer focused. And you can see in this case as well, like, no, actually the non-developers, the artists themselves, the people that like to design economic systems, they're really getting excited because this technology will open up for them possibilities to create these new realities. And I think this is a very exciting time for NFTs to experiment beyond what we have seen now. So I think what we have seen now, the NFT space as it's just a start. It's a start of a very creative potential of advancing this technology into ways that we do not know actually where it will go.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you on that. I think it's now when we see the clashes or the agreements between different groups, that's not just necessarily developers working with it. That's where we're really going to have the interesting outcome and see what's going to happen in the future. But there is beyond everything that we've discussed now, there is one problem which is kind of being brought up over and over and over again, which I think we actually do need to mention, the environmental impact. Basically, if you mention NFTs or that you've worked with blockchain or anything, that's one of the first questions you get. That is a problem, if you feel ashamed about it or how you deal with it. How do you think we're going to solve this in the future? I know that Ethereum, for example, is working on layer 2, which should have happened for several, they've talked about for a really long time. It's not happened yet, but and Tezos is much better as well in terms of environmental impact. But still, I think there is a worry within artists who is either just joined or are looking to join. How can we as a community address this, acknowledge the fear, acknowledge the problem?
Yeah, so I think the problem is there because the biggest smart contract platform out there was Ethereum, and Ethereum is proof of work, so it's based upon computer power. So this is with Tezos, because it's proof of stake. It's not, the consensus mechanism doesn't work like that. So it is actually sustainable. So how do we solve it? Well, Tezos actually already solved it. There are many other proof of stake blockchains. So I think it's just more about education. So that when people say sustainability is important for me, that they then know which blockchain to choose. And that's actually, I would say there are many public blockchains, all of them are competing. And but it's like, I think we're all driving the whole open source development forward together, but we all just have different characteristics. So I would say if you are saying, okay, I would like to make use of a certain technology, just inform yourself and just figure out what is this blockchain versus the other one. So if you're saying sustainability is important for me, yes, then I would advise, of course, to look at proof of stake blockchains over proof of work. Yeah.
I couldn't say it better, so thank you.
I can't agree more. I can't agree more. Yeah, I guess the move to like POS is like absolutely like crucial, vital. Otherwise, we're not gonna go anywhere. Like I work with artists, I talk with artists, and that's one of the first issues that come up with in every conversation. So I'm actually happy that Tezos and POS-based blockchains are, we have through them we've made a huge improvement. So yeah.
Also going back to physical versus digital and scarcity, etc., and thinking about some of the collectors that we see on these networks. It's kind of a new audience that's completely comfortable with the art being completely digital. That's basically what you own. How, like, bridging this to the more traditional art collectors, for example, is there conversation? Is that also education, or is there other ways of doing that?
That's a harsh question. No, I wish I had like an idea or a solution for that. The first thing that goes to my mind is it's a matter of time. The same way as I was mentioning before, like how our approach to the aesthetics coming from algorithms and softwares and machines, mainly AI applied to the creative industry, have changed drastically or significantly in the last few years. And now, like, being able to provide or to assign some value to this non-human kind of artworks, I guess the same feelings are going to appear and evolve in this regard, like assigning lots of value to digital assets, even if they are like very small. But then lots of other questions obviously appear. And a good example is what happened yesterday or 2 days ago, guys. Now I don't remember. But when Christie's were selling this NFT from Andy Warhol, that they were selling, well, they were saying that this was an original image that Andy Warhol produced with a very old machine, with a very old computer called Amiga. But the NFT that they were selling was like, I don't know, 3,000 times, no, 6,000 pixels. Anyway, that the resolution was more than HD. And obviously, Andy Warhol, I doubt that this was the case when he produced this piece. And actually, it was 300 pixels times 250 or something like that. So there's a whole new question here. Okay, even if you give a lot of value to this digital asset, like, does it matter if, for instance, in this case, something super technical, as in like the resolution of that artwork, does it really matter? Does your value change if it's HD or not HD? Do you give, or do you prefer something that is, no, it's original, but that was the technology at that moment of time, so I really value this piece because of that fact, which opens, like, again, new roles for cultural institutions, galleries, and other profiles in the creative industry, such as like people working on conservation of digital assets and digital goods, which it sounds something, well, to me, it sounds something very fascinating.
I think it's really important, Stina, to build a bridge with a traditional art world like ASAP. By bringing, for example, by just showcasing the possibilities. I'm personally involved in a couple of NFT-related projects where I'm curating, actually. So I'm bringing the artists, selecting the artworks, and my approach has always been to, basically like was said before, show what is like, what is unfamiliar, And so, for example, we're building physical objects, which is called like possession tokens, for example, and along with like many other media in digital art. And I welcome initiatives like Christie's with Andy Warhol, like Albert said, or even what Christie's did with Beeple, like I said before, because it sort of like opened the market. So this is good. Going back to the Uffizi, and the sale for like 170,000, the collector was actually, a traditional, art collector, and so it's good to see a growing interest. It's important, it's crucial to build a bridge with the traditional art world through the artworks that are on sales with the collectors, bring the old, the more, I would say like, the collectors from the traditional art world in, because right now the money is in the crypto. Like most of those transactions are, within the crypto community, people buying and supporting each other and flipping tokens. That's where the money is. So as soon as we build that bridge, as soon as we close that gap, that's when it will be beneficial for everyone, for the artists and everyone else involved.
What I also think is, with a new technology, I think you always first have the people that are curious, so driven by curiosity. That I think was the first stage. I think we're entering a second stage, which is that the people enter that are, or the institutions enter that are being challenged. And I think it's always this combination of that the institution, the old reality will join when they are curious enough or when they are challenged. However, I do not think that the whole world has to be on the blockchain. So if you're not curious, if you're not challenged, then probably you're not joining, but that's also fine. So, yeah.
The whole world on the blockchain sounds like a nightmare, to be honest. I've had that question once, actually, but I thought, and I was, no, definitely not. But isn't it also, because I know that some parts of the crypto community, for example, now with the latest auction with Christie's, with the CryptoPunks and the display there, that they were shown in this minimal way up, and it was basically a hunting game. You needed to go in and find them. That also the crypto community actually felt quite betrayed with that, where they thought that it was the case of, somewhat being accepted because these CryptoPunks went out for auction, and when actually they went there to see how they were displayed, it was just displayed in a really awkward way and not done in a good way. And it was basically Christie's going, yeah, we kind of want your money, but we don't really care about your art. So I completely agree. The bridging needs to happen, but it's also from like both sides. It's like we need to bring the art world over, but we also need to make sure that the crypto, like they feel like they're being respected as well. Actually talking about, there's quite an interesting question here from the audience, which I think it might be literal, but it's actually quite interesting if you take a slight philosophical take on it. Recently, a tweet was sold for $2.5 million. Does the owner own a tweet or the words?
Oh, God.
Why are you looking at me, people? Seriously, I wish I had the answer. I don't know. Let's try to discuss it because I have no idea how to attack this.
I also don't know if we can have the answer on this. I mean, a tweet, like, that's already something maybe that Twitter owns, right? Like, who is an owner here? I think this is then, of course, this is where real world and blockchain then interact. When you in the real world make sure there's something like a license and people, we all acknowledge this license, then you can talk about ownership. Especially when it's something digital, right? So if it's something physical, you could say ownership is being defined if I hold it. But then like the other example that I gave before, you can actually also collectively own something and actually hang it somewhere else. So I think it's more about the mutual acknowledgement of ownership, which now have copyright and all these licenses. I think it's all just about licenses and acknowledging the truth of this license.
Any other remarks?
No.
But this is also, I mean, this is not the truth. I think it's another exploration that we're actually entering here.
Yeah, exactly. These are very new spaces that are still yet to explore in a sense. I don't like this feeling that sometimes one has in these new spaces, that the first one to put the flag on, it's just like that means, in terms of ownership, that's the one who deserves the ownership. I don't know. Again, these systems are so complex that all the standards and all the parameters and all the values or variables that we had so far and that we've been grabbing on to describe certain rules and a certain scene, now they are like challenged. And as we've been keep saying it the whole evening, at the same time, that's super interesting, super challenging, and at the same time, it also can become like very problematic.
It's interesting that you're mentioning kind of claiming the stake, putting a flag in it, because I think it's quite common that you get that feeling within the crypto community that there is this certain claim of that we were here first, we did this before you joined, which of course is quite funny.
Yeah. Especially when they talk about like, do you know how many out of 10,000 CryptoPunks, there are 6,000 plus males and 3,800 were women, like females. Why? Speaking of like, reiterating the same systemic dynamics.
But it's quite, because I think the more people that are joining now, exactly, the more diversity will bring as well. Do you think, like, how do you feel like, is it important? I mean, it's not important, but like, how do we meet this? How do we meet the fact that some people will say, actually, you might not know what you're doing because I was here first and I've done it much longer. How do we meet a claim or a conversation or a statement like that?
I think it's something that I've lived in my, like when I opened Synthesis, when I started Synthesis, because we were branding Synthesis as the first VR-based art gallery, which is a fact, hard to question. And some people looked at that as a way, so VR has been around for some time. There's been galleries showing VR, and I was always like, yes, but which one constantly, So I think it's like what I've learned from my experience is that you really need to be respectful of history, like learn and educate yourself on history. Definitely the Etherea or like CryptoPunks, they were here before like a lot of other people. Respect the East, and educate yourself in the history, respect it, because there were people before you, and sort of like I think it's just a matter of like literally mutual, be willing to listen and learn, and yes, and then from what has been done before, and just be respectful of history. Yes.
Yeah, I actually agree. I think this whole notion of how long are you already in the blockchain space, and how people introducing themselves with their whole history background, how long they are inside. I think we shouldn't confuse that all has to do with merit. What you already said about the CryptoPunks being male versus female, it was until now a very male-dominated space. But I can also really see, of course, tech in general is very male-dominated, and I'm seeing this change actually actively, that a lot of these like programming courses that are now there, a lot of women are joining. Why didn't women join before? Well, that's a difficult question. Like I am a true believer that it's not because they didn't have interest in it. I think there's a lot of nudging, a lot of reasoning why some spaces are dominated more by men and more by females. And then, I mean, this is just the start of a diversification topic, right? It's not only male versus female. So in general, I think, yeah, maybe you were first, but what does it mean? What does it say? I think what is very exciting now again is this whole thing that we're reaching the real world. The real world just consists of everyone, and I'm highly encouraging everyone to educate yourself to see how can I join. Like also from Tezos, for example, we are putting a lot of effort now in educational material. Of course, when you want to create some tooling, some platforms, it's very beneficial if you yourself, or maybe someone that you can ask, that is a developer, right? But I think it's just all about not fearing that you're not a target group. Please educate yourself. The tools are there. It's just all about empowerment. And if you just enter now, yeah, just welcome, and it doesn't matter.
But I guess this kind of ties back to finding your space and the right platform as well, because I mean, there is a lot of emphasis on some of the platforms that this is basically the one that you need to join to be able to sell. Do you think that education is also the answer to maybe find the space that will potentially fit you? Because I mean, some of them are focusing on experimenting, some of them are focusing on more community, but some of them are also really focusing on purely sales and pushing as much sales as possible. What would you recommend like a new joiner to do? Like how, because it's also the reality is that joining right now, we have gas fees, etc., which are really expensive for some of them. How's the best way to find your way in if you're completely new?
Well, that is a very good question, and I don't think I have the answer. I mean, like also what you're saying, like there are now many blockchains. How can you find the best one fitting you? Maybe do not worry that much about it. Find like in your own environment, like the resources. Go to all like what you can see for many blockchains is that there are all these forums there that you can ask questions. When you get help or you get, you find your way in something that you think fits you, just continue and don't overthink if it's, if it's the exact right one. And I can only talk from the perspective of Tezos. Like if you're based here in Berlin, you can always contact me. But in general, it's on the internet. So, just go to all the forums that are out there, inform yourself. Don't let anyone else tell you something. Do your own research, I would say.
Yeah,
Albert, I'm not an artist. I'm sorry. I've never mean to it. So you have to take this one.
Absolutely. Just like it's on you in a sense, no pressure. But the info is there, so educate yourself. Spend some time doing research on all the different possibilities. Of course, it is daunting because the huge amount of information and it's a complex topic. But also, it will depend also on your personal values. I mean, of course, there's going to be lots of individual differences. For me, it was definitely, for instance, to put a specific example, a no-go Ethereum because of the environmental impact. So, okay, that I got rid of lots of opportunities in that sense, and I focus on a smaller, smaller options in a sense. So you need to again do some research and have clear where do you want to go and what are your ideals and your beliefs, for sure.
So, I mean, it is quite a niched intersection, art and blockchain. And right now it feels like there's absolutely endless possibilities. Like we can go and, not really, but basically do what we want and take it where we want. What would you want to see for it in the future? In what direction would you want to see, and what kind of developments would you want to see in the future?
I would like to see more like artworks that really engage with the medium. And what I mean by that, with the blockchain, the leverage blockchain as a medium. I would like to see because what I've seen so far is the kind of digital art that I've seen so far. It's absolutely nothing groundbreaking compared to the history of the digital art in general. I mean, when I think of something really groundbreaking, I'm thinking, for example, of the very first internet artwork in 1991, The Thing, by a bulletin board system, which was an online forum. And speaking of marketplaces where people could exchange, buy and sell artworks, The Thing was one of them. And it was in 1991. I'm thinking, for example, of Rebecca Allen with the work she did at Kraftwerk. So, the very first exercises, experiments of 3D rendering. I'm thinking, for example, like I said, of my friend Tamiko Thiel, who, came up with this beautiful project, made this beautiful artwork that is part of the San Jose Museum of Contemporary Art, which which is called Beyond Manzanar. And Manzanar was one of the few concentration camps where Japanese Americans were interned there. And so all of these artworks were leveraging very new technology. In the case of The Thing, internet art, Rebecca Allen, 3D rendering, Tamiko, VR, and they did it in a way that was critical, and it's still telling a story. I think we are missing this. I don't want to come off as the extremely picky art guy, but it's something that we have not seen yet. So what I would like to see in the future is artists, see more artworks that leverage the technology, the medium, the blockchain, to tell us a story.
You should have a look at Sarah Friend's Off Supply. I don't know if you've seen that one. Basically, it's all about ownership, and it's done via NFTs. She's the developer as well, and that piece is one of the first ones which is dealing with this complex notion of ownership. And it was released last week, I believe. It's really good.
One of the artworks that are going to be featured in my show is an artist is the artist leverages the data. So basically it's an Ethereum transaction. In the transaction, basically it's a love message of Duchampian irony. Because then he put it on them, he turned it into NFT, and he's challenging the question of ownership and what is art and what is in an NFT. This is the kind of artworks that I want to see. These are really that, and I'm shaken when I see these things. I'm okay, I'm finally seeing something that is beautiful, intellectually sophisticated, and because what I've seen so far is not even a product of high software or it's something that needs to be addressed, in my opinion.
So the question is, what would excite me, the direction, right, of the...
Yeah, because of it being so new, and I mean, being such a very specific intersection of blockchain and art, and we are at a very exciting time right now where two communities are meeting. It feels like we have endless possibilities. Where would you want to see this to go? What would you want to see in the future?
What for me always already was interesting in blockchain itself, before the intersection blockchain and the art world, was that blockchain on its own is a very creative movement, because people are creators, right? Blockchain is something that is being shaped, so it's being created. So for me, this whole intersection, blockchain and art, it's beautiful, because artists they are these explorative people. And where does it go? That is actually upon the artists themselves, because of course you have one thing that is the aesthetics of art. I can aesthetically like something, but for me the most exciting part about art is actually that you can be challenged, you can be surprised. There's this whole emotional, what is art is for me an emotional experience. So I hope that the artists that will work together with blockchain will embrace this opportunity to explore. And me myself, I can already see when we talk about the digital sphere, that I'm already old. I'm already not putting on AR layers, and I'm not on TikTok, and I'm not doing all of this stuff. And I hope that probably through art I can maybe be challenged again to maybe go into this metaverse. And I just hope that art will continue surprising us by embracing this new technology. Yeah.
If I need to make like a kind of a wish list with bullet points, maybe I would say top one would be to have a community that is that it has like long-term oriented decision making, which would solve, for instance, all the environmental impacts, or would put most of the efforts in trying to solve that before just like thinking about anything else. And then I would say that I'm really looking forward to these interactions that I was saying or the way that I imagine these two layers of reality, or the way we interact with these more physical and digital realities, and an artistic exploration on this, how to combine these two crazy ideas or crazy interactions in between these two layers of reality.
And with that, I think we're done, or yeah, or what? Well, yeah. Sorry. I agree with you, George, that I'm really looking forward to seeing how the medium is being used for, or how technology is going to be used for creating art, and when it actually becomes used as a medium. And I think we've seen some really great examples. Just like I mentioned, Sarah Friend had a piece that was being released last week which is dealing with the notion of ownership and what ownership actually is, and fractionalized ownership. And if you have a big group owning one piece, how do you deal with that? Is it one communal piece, or is it several different ones? And with that, I think we're done. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We have covered most of them. Some of them are quite literal in terms of marketplaces and such that we would recommend, but I'm not entirely sure if that's a discussion that we want to go into. So I think we're fine. Thank you so much.